Welcome to our webinar on the reference architecture of the ICRA initiative. It's now 3 o'clock, and well, I will slowly start with introducing who is organizing this event. I'm Matthias Gumm. I'm the coordinator of the CISERO in CSA. And CISERO is the project that coordinates this event and is responsible to support the ORA initiative with exploitation and dissemination activities. And the webinar today is one of these activities because, yeah, the role is really to bring the results of the ORA initiative to a broader audience, also to allow externals to interact with the results. And in this context, we also are organizing this webinar today. You can see we have a lot of partners from different European countries, and even if the projects within the ORA initiative are funded by different member states, we are funded by the European Commission. And this is the agenda for today. You saw it already on the website, on the invitation to this webinar. We will have first an introduction by Alberto Marti on the strategic goals of this reference architecture. Why do we think it's important, not only for the projects, but also for the broader Cloud-Edge Continuum ecosystem? And then we will really dive into the different elements of this reference architecture. And this will be done by Florian Müller from SAP and Mario Baldi from TIM. And it's important that we also give you the opportunity to give feedback on this reference architecture, because this is now version 1 of this reference architecture. And as I said, the idea is that also potential future users of the different components that will be developed within the ORA initiative should be able to contribute within this framework of this reference architecture. Therefore, it's important that it makes sense also to currently non-participating companies that want to get in the near future part of our initiative. And we have the possibility to comment this reference architecture already today and to ask questions today, but there will also be possibility to give feedback on the CISERO website. We'll show the link later on in the conclusions. I think now most of the participants should have joined. Well, I don't think I should spend much more time on explaining the role of CISERO. The most important part today is the IPCEI-CIS Reference Architecture, and I think we are a bit ahead of schedule, and I can already hand over to Alberto to give us an introduction on what is the IPCEI-CIS Reference Architecture, what's the purpose, what's it meant for. With that, Alberto, I hand over to you.
Great, thank you very much. And yeah, from my side, well, hello everyone, good afternoon, and also big thanks to the CISERO project as the IPCEI-CIS Exploitation Office to organize this this webinar. As you know, we we've published. We announced that we had the reference architecture a couple of months ago for the General Assembly in Gdansk, in Poland. It was presented to the member states, the Commission, and to the whole ecosystem of IPCEI-CIS partners. And then it was a couple of weeks ago that we finalized the process to get this document ready for publication, and that is has been one of the main milestones of the project. So the first objective was to define what this architecture had to look like, the first version, as Florian will explain in a second. It is a tool not only for the project itself, for the IPCEI and its community of a few hundred European organizations working on cloud and edge computing, but more importantly for the larger ecosystem, for other companies and other member states and other cloud providers out there to understand what we're doing, and also to, in time, find the right path for them to contribute to what we're doing with their technology or their services, but also to use and leverage what the results of the project. So thank you very much again to CISERO for the CISERO project for organizing this. Let me share my screen, and I will offer you like a very quick intro to the IPCEI, what we are doing and how we are organizing things. Okay. So I assume you can see my screen. So if you're here, I understand most of you might already know what the IPCEI Cloud is. I want also to put it, I like to put it in a broader context. So yes, the IPCEI Cloud is so far the largest European initiative ever in terms of building cloud and its technologies in Europe. It is also at the same time the little sister in this family, this larger family of important projects of common European interest. So compared with other projects that you might have already heard of, I mean the hydrogen or the batteries, I mean that's a big one, or the microelectronics. I mean those are big projects with a lot of funding. The IPCEI Cloud has been the first IPCEI focused on software, and that's also a challenge, also in terms of the reception and the expectations. The kind of things we produce are not tangible in that sense, or they're not so tangible as other IPCEIs. It also takes a lot of time to bring together so many companies from 12 member states with many different profiles, and that's a unique element of the IPCEI Cloud, is that we are bringing together technology providers, cloud service providers, but also end users. I mean, people like Fincantieri or Deutsche Bahn or the Mondragon Corporation, or I mean, the people that are now getting to the realization that they are traditionally consumers of technologies that others produce, but they also want to start playing an active role in controlling the technologies that they need. And in that, they're bringing these collaborations with other actors in the ecosystem. So that's also a unique aspect of the IPCEI that I like very much. Also, it provides this kind of third way for how we do innovation in Europe, how we compete from Europe. You know, there's also this traditional dichotomy between looking for a European champion, where we have to identify a large company that we have to put all our resources, all our hope that they will be able to compete, grow enough, and compete with the typically US companies. The other alternative, many member states resort to the opposite alternative, which is let's invest all our resources in a local company, in a national champion. Forget about the rest of the European partners. That's also always the dichotomy that many people has had to deal with. The IPCEIs come as something in between. So it's a more resilient way to collaborate in producing some innovation in Europe that involves working together, putting a lot of money, relatively, to go to traditional funding mechanisms, putting a lot of money on something, but that something has to come with collaboration between different companies from different member states. In that sense, it's also more resilient to takeovers and things that happen with big companies when you give them a lot of money and then they say, okay, so long, thanks for all the fish. So this is different. And in doing that, we are also encouraging collaboration between companies that many, not exaggerating, but many of them came to us saying, you know what, before the IPCEI, we were not even allowed to speak to each other because we are competing in some markets. So the IPCEI is also breaking these barriers between companies. So that's really, really good. And the ultimate challenge for the IPCEI Cloud is something as complex or as simple as being able to create a cloud edge continuum, being able to allow companies and users and customers to have some technologies, some services that can manage all this heterogeneous infrastructure and services from potentially hundreds of different providers at some point, to actually deploy applications on top of that and move them and repatriate them to the data centers and deploy them on the telco edge, and maybe some AI workloads to have some automatic adaptation to the environment. I mean, a lot of things that they need this combination of many different providers and technologies down there. So the project was approved by the European Commission. So the IPCEI, as you know, are led and funded by the member states in coordination, but they have to be approved by the European Commission, typically by DG Competition, because it's a state aid. So we're getting money directly from our member states to fix a market failure. So the approval for this IPCEI specifically was late 2023. That was approved by DG Competition to go ahead with this co-investment or investment state aid from the member states, but also co-investment from companies. We set up the whole governance structures, not so complex for such a big project, but we have the general assembly with all the companies. We have a presentation group with different companies coordinating the work in different work streams, as I will explain in a second. And then we have the supervisory board, where we, as companies, represent the partners before the member states and the European Commission. So, and this structure brings you how we organize things. We have 4 work streams that, as you see, they cover a bit kind of the natural layers in the cloud market. So we have the infrastructure providers with telcos and cloud service providers. We have a software layer on top, different technologies that are providing some abstraction on top of the infrastructure. We have the layer that deals with the application, the deployment of applications across this continuum, and then we apply that to a number of strategic domains or sectors that have been already identified. Just to give you an idea, before this project was approved in December 2023, we had been working with other member states and other companies and the Commission for around 3 years. So this project comes after a lot of common work in finding alignment between companies, but also trying to understand how we can put things together for a company in the end to adopt this technology and use it. So typically, how can you see this? So you could see this as a number of companies bringing together their infrastructure services and their work stream 1, helping to create this continuum. And for this, we do need other companies. So we need more cloud providers. We need more telcos globally, because the continuum has to be global as well. So if a ship from Fincantieri departs from Italy and needs some additional resources in Singapore, they would have to be able to connect their onboard data center with a local telco. So this continuum has to be global. On top of that, we need a number of technologies that bring sovereignty at the tech level as well. So the technologies that European companies use for all this have to be European. And the IPCEI also brings a novelty in encouraging, I want to say forcing, but it's not forcing. It's encouraging these companies to produce as much open source technologies as possible. So most of IPCEI Cloud is producing open source, European open source technologies. And on top of that, we have application providers, some of them specific for some domains, where we expect integrators, very important element here, and solution providers to use this stack of technologies, different combinations of the components that Florian would explain, to target specific needs in specific sectors and bring that to the users and to the customer. So we are in the business of creating this ecosystem of technologies that are interoperable, services that are interoperable for our same companies, or more importantly, other companies to use this stack of technologies, solutions for their own customers to make business. And finally, just to give you a broad idea of who we are. So as I said, 12 member states, more than 120 companies from many different sectors, not only tech and cloud, also telecom operators, but also end users. Also in the defense, I mean, Airbus, I mean, there's a lot of them with their specific interest in the project, but also interest in knowing what other companies are doing and helping each other in being more integrated. these 120 companies are coordinated through the facilitation group, where we have different work streams, different representatives helping in this integration that sometimes doesn't come naturally. It has to be encouraged and facilitated. And then finally, SAP and Open Systems coordinate the facilitation group in front of the Commission and the Supervisory Board. So that was my brief introduction to the whole project, and now I leave it to Florian to bring you the really interesting stuff, the more technical aspects. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. All right, so I will now go a little bit over the document itself and the content of the reference architecture. Yeah, let's jump into it. So when you're looking for the document, which looks like this, you will probably come across this page. This is the ORA announcement website that the reference architecture has been released. I like the headlines because there are a few important clues in here. First of all, this is the first version of the reference architecture. There will be a second and a third, and maybe a fourth one, right? So this is really the very first start of having a reference architecture. So don't expect a final document here. Don't expect anything that you can take and it's finished and polished. It's a starting point. The second important keyword here is groundwork. So don't expect a tutorial or a manual how to build a cloud stack, right? It's not that you, here 80 pages of document. If you implement everything like that, you have a compliant IPCEI-CIS cloud stack. That's not how it's going to work. So the reference architecture is more about concepts and best practices. Some of them are really well known and proven in reality. Others are pretty new, and especially if you're talking about federation, there will be a lot of things that will be new and invented by the architecture task force, which basically leads me also to the next slide. So who's actually producing this document? That's the architecture task force of IPCEI-CIS, and it is a group that has members or representatives from all the different work streams that Alberto already mentioned. So in general, we have something like 15 to 20 people from the different work streams, from different backgrounds, from different companies, from different countries, from different industries. So it's a broad mix of different views, experiences, focus points that we're trying to get together and building an architecture from the different experiences of the participants. So the whole IPCEI-CIS has about 120 members, so we can't have all of them in the architecture task force. That would be a little bit of a chaos. Therefore, we are managing this through representatives through the work streams. So if you want to be part of the architecture task force, you have to go through the work streams. The idea is that the work streams representatives are in charge of moving information back and forth from the architecture task force to the work streams and the other way around. So let's look into this first version of the reference architecture. The majority of the content is about layers and domains, and then there are a little other chapters I'm going to talk about, but the majority is about layers and domains. So what are layers and domains? Layers are the different levels of abstraction, and this goes from the application layer on top down to the physical hardware and everything in between. And then we have domains. Those are cross-cutting aspects, and here we have especially security, federation, sustainability, and management. I'm going to explain those as well in a second. So let's start with the layers. So at the top there's the application layer. So that's basically the layer that deals with building applications, designing applications, packaging applications, delivering applications, everything application related. The second layer is about data. So how do we want to collect, process, exchange data within data centers, within data centers and edge, between different providers that are part of the Cloud Edge Continuum. So everything around data is in this layer. And then there's an AI layer, because there has to be an AI layer those days. This is how do we embed AI into this whole setup, and especially we are talking here about distributed AI. So how do we can actually spread AI functionality across multiple vendors? Then we have the service orchestration layer, which is basically the glue between every other layer. So the idea is, if you have an application of some kind and you need services, you need some kind of services, you would go to the service orchestration layer and get access to the services you need. And that could be basically anything. It could be a database, it could be an object store, but it could be also those specialized services that provide text calculation for Australia, right? So you get it through this as well. So the idea is that this is really the hub for all the services where you get access. Then we have the Cloud Edge platform layer. Here we are talking mainly about runtime environments. So your applications, your workload needs to run somewhere. So this layer is about platform as a service, serverless containers for legacy application. We also talk about virtual machines. So everything that makes your application run. And also some of the base services you would expect. Yeah, most of the services expect some kind of storage. Database, an object store, file storage, stuff like that. But there are also other services in the security space, for example. There's also tools and libraries. So this layer is about really running your applications and your workload somehow. And then we have the virtualization layer. So basically, if the platform layer needs access to resources, it could be compute or storage or network, then that would be the task of the virtualization layer to actually make this happen. When we talk about resources here, we are mainly talking about network resources. We are mainly talking about the network resources in a data center. If we are talking about network between edges and data centers, then we are at the network systems layer. So this is really about connecting across large distances with certain qualities and whatnot. So this is more the telco point of view. And then finally, the last layer is about hardware resources. At some point, we need hardware. So those are the 8 layers that we are looking at this moment. When we had the discussion about the layers, there's also a question about terminology and the terms IaaS, CaaS, PaaS, SaaS are all over the place. So we try to map this to the layers that we have in the reference architecture document. This is not an exact science. You can argue that some things belong more to this or that, but to give you a rough idea where those different categories live, we have a diagram for this as well. So now we talked about the layers. The next is the cross-cutting domains. We have 4 of those. One is about security and compliance. That's basically needed on every level. It's about authentication, authorization, key management, certificate management, zero trust, all those kind of things. Then we have a domain that is called sustainability. So this is basically about energy efficiency. This is also something that needs to be managed across the stack, from getting sensor data on a hardware level to making the decision where to move workload because it's more energy efficient over here or over there. So this is also a cross-cutting domain. Then we have the management domain. Yeah, you can argue that's probably not the best name for it, but it's basically the bucket that has everything, that every component, every functionality that is needed across the stack that doesn't fit anywhere else. So we are talking about monitoring, logging, audit logging, some kind of compliance things, local security things, and their performance measuring, automation, and there's probably more, right? So, so this is the bucket for we need it and it has to live somewhere. And then the final one, and this is the important one, and this is where we probably be the most, or we will add the most innovative thing here in the whole reference architecture. That's the federation domain. So in the end, we want that multiple providers provide services and application or workload operators be able to get access to the services using those services. So how does this work, right? So we need some kind of standardization here. We need standard concepts, how things should work, how do we transfer metadata and stuff like that. So that's probably one of the key aspects that we are targeting. And putting this all together, we will end up in a diagram like this. You see the different layers here from application down to the physical resources. It's not a strict layering, right? So so we put data and AI, for example, on the same level because there's no real order between those two. And also when we're talking about network systems, they are really special, so they don't really fit in a stack, so they're a little bit by a side. But that's basically the layers. And then we have the cross-cutting things: sustainability, security, compliance, and management at the side. And then the federation box that unifies the boxes above. So we left out the hardware layer from federation because that probably doesn't make sense. But we had a lot of discussions where federation starts and ends, and I guess this discussion is not over yet. You also see which work streams are looking into which topics, right? So that there's a little bit of color coding. But we have to be really, really careful because there's a blurry line between some of those, right? So service orchestration, for example, as you can see here, should be tackled by workstream 3, but there's certainly an overlap with workstream 2 as well, because service orchestration is important there as well. And also virtualization and hardware is something that there's no strict border between those two. So it also requires that the work streams work together, right? So it's not totally separate working groups. So if you want to go one step further, this is basically the same diagram, just with a lot more detail. So what we tried is for each of those layers and domains, find examples, what might live in those. And you see all those small boxes here that have been added. And if you look at the document, you will find explanations for each of those boxes. So there are a few sentences for each of those boxes. For some are more, for some are less, but they are all described in there. This is probably not the final state, right? So this is just the first batch of things that we came up with. I'm pretty sure we will find more things that are not in here yet. We will probably split things into multiple boxes. We will probably rename a few. So this is more just the starting point. And yeah, we will work on this as well. So if you're interested in those, as I said, in the reference document, reference architecture document, there are descriptions of all of those. So this was basically the summary of the layers and domains. There are some more topics in the document. One of those is about roles. It's not very developed, let's put it that way. So we acknowledge that there are different roles on different layers. We started talking about those, but this needs definitely more work. So if you see this document and read this chapter, you probably will be a little bit disappointed, but yeah, we didn't have the time to actually go into details here. So in summary, if you're looking at the whole document, there's nothing too surprising in this document. If you have worked with a cloud stack, with a cloud environment, you should feel pretty familiar. There are probably a lot of things that you don't need because they are really specific to some industries, and there are probably also things that you're missing, which are then really special to you, but probably don't have widespread use that we can put it in the reference document. So no surprises here. It's also at this point not very exciting, right? So I've seen people looking at the document say, yes, that's how you can split up a cloud environment. So yes, the more exciting part will be coming, I guess, in version 2 and later. What this version 1 is, it's the necessary groundwork. So we defined the building blocks and the terminology that we can use for further discussion. You have to imagine that we have in the architecture task force in the discussion, something like 10, 12, 15 different companies discussing together from different backgrounds, different industries, different countries, also people with different experiences. Getting to a common picture of how a cloud stack should look like is actually really difficult. And also terminology is really an interesting part here because you're talking about the same thing but using different words. And getting to coming to a unified definition of what things are can be really challenging, and this is what this document basically is about. It's a common ground of building blocks and terminology that we can use to now move ahead. Moving ahead means that we are now talking about the really interesting things, and this is federation and also in some parts standardization of things that we need to make a cloud edge continuum actually work. Which brings me already to what's coming next. So the architecture task force is now working on version 2. The release is planned for end of the year, so we have about half a year left to get there. And the two focus topics for version 2 are functional interfaces and federation. I will not go into details, but I will explain roughly what this is about and why this is then becoming the more exciting part. So functional interfaces is about, well, we have all those blocks now, we have those layers and domains. How they actually communicate with each other, how they talk to each other, what data needs to be exchanged, stuff like that. So we are looking into how those layers and boxes basically interact and must and should interact. And we will also look into, hey, what industry standards already exist in those domains. So this is one part. And the other part is the federation part. So we are looking into, let's say we have different stacks from different vendors using different technologies. How can I actually make use of a service that lives over there? How do I can move my workload from Germany to Spain without losing a lot? So it's about this federation idea, and this is what is probably different from a lot of cloud concept that you know, and this is what IPCEI-CIS is striving for, so that we can actually make sure that we have a common concept how we federate services, workload, data across Europe. So that's what we're working on, and as you can imagine, this is then it gets to the exciting part. So version 2 will be more exciting than version 1. Yeah, that's basically the short summary of the reference architecture version 1 and an outlook on version 2.
Okay, thank you, Florian. And in the agenda, you're also the one who now moderates the Q&A session. And we are a bit ahead of schedule, which is good and gives more time for discussion, but we already have some comments or questions in the chat. Maybe let's start with them. There's one from Michelle Capobianco, who wants to know a bit what are the exciting parts from my perspective. You already have answered it, but Michelle, if you want to know more, then just speak up. Otherwise, the second question would be from Adrian Leber. Do you want to repeat the question?
Yes, thanks. So Adrian speaking from INEA, France. So thanks for the presentation, quite clear and quite useful. I'm just wondering whether the working group is also addressing the question of continuum at the application level. This is mainly if you look at the current architecture, I have the feeling that actually the continuum is addressed at the infrastructure level. By the infrastructure, I mean let's say the computing, storage, and network levels. But I'm just wondering how things will be addressed and managed at the application level. For example, if you consider applications to manage highway in different countries, we can expect that each country will have its own applications. But obviously, my vehicle, when I will go, for example, to visit Germany during my holidays, my French car should be able to communicate and interact with all those applications. So how you address that? How can you provide a continuum at the different level of the layers you presented today?
Yeah, so that's probably a question to the companies actually building those things. But in workstream 4, we are looking at different use cases, and I guess something similar that you described is also part of it, but I'm not entirely sure. But yes, so the idea is if we have a common set of concepts and APIs and interfaces, it should be possible to move workload or from one country to another. It's actually not bound to a country, right? It's actually more about multiple providers. So even in the same country, it should be possible to move from one provider to another, ideally in an automated fashion, so that you don't need anybody manually pressing buttons or something. So that's a goal, and this is the federation part I was pointing at that we are now looking at this moment. So you will not find a lot of those things in version 1 of the document, but version 2 will probably have more on this topic.
Thanks.
Then we have a question from Paolo Vecchi about Gaia X. Paolo, do you want to repeat your question?
Yes, no problem. Thank you very much for the time. Well, I see a lot of very interesting stuff. I really love the finally more development also in the infrastructure federation, which I hope is gonna, let's say, lead also to the possibility of saying, okay, I'm running a workload now here in Luxembourg. I want to actually move this workload, let's say, in Paris for some reason, and that will allow actually to do it maybe as a cross providers with different technologies. That would be absolutely great. That is one of the things that I thought that will happen also when Gaia X started, but their focus switched more on the data side. So what is in a way the let's say the overlaps or the cooperation that actually could be between these projects and Gaia X?
I guess we will see, because that's a little bit part of the functional interfaces, right? So when we're talking about the diagram at the left, so how do the different layers actually interact with each other? If the Gaia X Federation, that is probably then part of the data block in here. So we are now figuring out how this actually works, and we really don't want to invent anything new here, right? So whatever is established and working and used, we want to reuse. We don't want to boil the ocean here and invent new APIs and new concepts. And we are currently in the process of looking at those functional interfaces. So we haven't really looked into Gaia X at this point. So I can't really answer this today, but this is probably an important thing that we should put on our list as well.
Yep. Well, just for the purpose of actually not reinventing something, if there is something useful already there, may as well recycle it.
Yeah. Don't invent anything, right? So everything, or many things of the things that we are looking at have been done before, right? So let's reuse what's there. If there's an industry standard, don't invent another one.
If I may add, Mauro Boldi, and I'm working with Florian, and I'm also working to leader. We are trying to check what are these functional interfaces that are not actually those that we will impose to the architecture, but those that the partners are using in their own specific solutions. And of course, GaiaX could be one of these. So probably in version 2.0, we will also check these relations, and not only with GaiaX. So there are also other examples. So that we have started to collect, for example, in the meeting last week.
Okay, I see that there's also a raised hand, but maybe first from Michelle Capobianco, a more detailed question. Michelle, do you want to speak up?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't find the button for the microphone. Yeah, no, that's very simple. Since we are increasingly creating knowledge from the data, no? From data we are moving to information, from information we are moving to knowledge, we are introducing artificial intelligence, so even additional capacity to build on that. So I was asking if for this architecture you see any role in the future for what could be semantic interoperability and abstraction. Also, to tell you the truth, I was a little bit worried by what Florian said, that you don't plan to invent anything new here, which is kind of dangerous statement, because probably we must invent, or you must invent something new or a lot of new things here to really compete with the hyperscalers, for instance. No? So if you just try to follow the same approach and the same kind of basic architecture and functional interface, there is no possibility to close the gap. If you try to invent something new, introduce something new, that is much more profitable, probably, for the future. But anyway, I let you comment.
Yeah, that's right. Especially the whole federation topic is something that doesn't exist in their way that we anticipate. So there will be something new. It's more about like the nitty-gritty details. So we probably don't want to invent yet another way of authenticating users, right? So that doesn't make any sense. But for the federation,
but authenticating the user is the easy part, let's say.
Exactly. So why should we tackle this again, right? So there's a standard, there's implementation, there's experience for years now. There's no need to do this again. But the federation part is certainly something where we need to put some brain power on. This is stuff that doesn't exist. At least not in the way as we wanted. So there's certainly stuff that we need to invent. But on a fine cost level, fine level detail, like as I said, authentication is a solved problem. We don't need to look at this. And I think you talked about semantic interoperability and abstraction. I think there's one partner, the EcoFed, that they are looking in exactly that. And we also they were also presented it at the Architecture Task Force, and we will certainly look into this again after the summer break.
So then I see a raised hand from someone with the short name Epaphos.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much. It's Angelos Harlaftis. You know me from 2008. I'm on the cloud in the commission. Of course, the questions they already have put from some of you, but on the architecture, or architecture, we should have a difference from the others if we want to do something practically, because making the same and the same things, we're entering to a circle which never ends for Europe. The second question was about the layer of the artificial intelligence, which I think, I don't know about the security. You spoke about the layer of security, but artificial intelligence, it is believed that must have a different, let's say, a different way of thinking comparing with the other security system, because the generative artificial intelligence is a kind of spy to such systems later on. So maybe with Europeans, we have to think on this level of thinking. And also, in your architecture, do you have any kind of open source or not? Thank you.
Let me do the open source stuff first. So everything basically we are doing here is open source. And actually we just in April we founded an own open source foundation, the NeoNephos Foundation, where we collect all the open source projects that are produced. Not everything, but a lot of this. And this is part of the Linux Foundation. So it's basically, we wanted to take out this open source stuff from a certain company. So we put it under a neutral governance model, right? So a lot of things, or most things that you see here, is open source. It's public money, so it's public source. So regarding AI, I'm actually not the expert. So this is a workstream 3 topic, and I'm not part of workstream 3, so I can't really answer this. But I'm pretty sure they're looking at security too, right? So compliance is probably one of the most interesting topics in the AI space, but I can't really comment on this.
Okay, then we have an exchange in the chat between Klaus and Paolo on the role of GAIA-X. Do you want to add something on what's already written? Or?
No. Matthias, no, I think it's a comprehensive answer, and it would go much too far to extend it. The net is it's complementary. Aura works on defining a reference, amongst others, a reference architecture for infrastructure, and Gaia works on a completely different level. Does nothing that Aura does, but provides trust framework that can be used to manage federations. C2.
Yep. Okay, and I see that Andrea has opened his mic. Andrea, do you have a question? Andrea Boller. Oh, it's just. No?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. No, thanks. No, I don't have any question. Was everything clear? Thank you.
Thank you. Then we have Xin Dong on the clarifying question.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. I think regarding the question and the discussion between Paulo and Klaus, I think as is to clarify how to integrate the both architectures, the data space architecture, GAIA-X Trust Frame architecture, and the Aura Cloud-Edge architecture still very important regarding the current many hundreds data space projects and consortiums. Thank you very much.
Klaus has already described that they address different aspects, but Alberto has also raised his hand. Do you want to?
Yeah, no, it was very quickly. It was like a comment, very quick comment about the open source and the expectations in terms of the innovation that this first version of the architecture brings. So as Florian mentioned, there's nothing too exciting here from the technical side, I would say. What for me personally, what's exciting about the architecture is that we managed to create this architecture. That's a small miracle that I am sure many of you will appreciate, that we managed to do this in a few months actually. So this creates this kind of basic understanding, kind of common language, a common understanding of what kind of components we are building as part of the different IPCEI projects. So the importance of this comes when if you understand the nature of the IPCEI. The IPCEI is not like it's called an integrated project, which is not a single project. It's hundreds of different, dozens of different projects, individual projects by different partners coming together and trying to align themselves and contribute to something in common. And that common thing has to be orchestrated or harmonized in a specific way. And that for us is this reference architecture. So the architecture itself might not bring any innovation as such up until now. As Florian mentioned, there would be innovation in the way we approach this challenge for federation and also the interfaces. But from the industrial side of things, these are baby steps that we hadn't taken before. It's true we need new stuff to compete against hyperscalers, but we also need to bring together everything that we already have in an ordered way, and this is an exercise to do that. Also, to make sure that maybe in authentication or any other kind of minor feature, we don't need to reinvent the wheel, but many different companies in Europe need to rediscover or discover that there are European alternatives to the technologies that they are using nowadays. So this is also an exercise for each other to discover what alternatives are available in the market that bring more digital sovereignty to their current solutions. So that is also important, and we didn't have a tool to do that yet, before that. And also, as I said before, bringing some path or identifying a clear path for other companies and other cloud service providers to incorporate their offerings and their technologies in the future. So this is why the architecture is so important. Also, innovation and research and development that's taking place in other programs like Horizon Europe or Digital Europe, to give them also a tool for that innovation taking place in universities and RTOs and all that, all these hundreds of millions of euros invested in Horizon Europe projects to effectively contribute to something that industry can more or less easily incorporate into their products later on. So this is also an important part of that innovation that's not purely technical, but it's very important at this point in my opinion.
Yep. Thanks.
Yeah, I can really second this. Getting 100 or 20 companies at a table coming up with a architecture document is challenging, especially from from a lot of different backgrounds, right? We have different technical backgrounds, we have different commercial backgrounds, we have different industries in here. So those discussions are not easy. So getting this out of the door was already a challenge. The next thing would be really interesting, the next step.
Okay, yeah, I think we are already in the conclusions part. There's one comment from Adrien on standardization activities, the role of ETSI and the differences from what's already happening. I don't know if Florian, you would have a short answer. Otherwise, I think
not really, as I don't know them by heart. So maybe we can answer this offline.
Yeah, I may also comment a little bit. Of course, we know that there are standards. On the other hand, here we are first asking to make a sort of synthesis of the implemented solutions. So we are not calling them standard. First, because we don't know how many will be the alternatives that will be in the final or at least in the second edition of the architecture. And then because honestly, it's quite difficult to talk about a standardized version. So having also experience, as Florian says, how many different implementations we have, and also considering that we are using quite a lot open solutions. And so by definition, if a solution is open, is also quite difficult to be standardized. But in any case, of course, we'll try to check what will be going on in the next months.
Okay. Many interesting aspects. I think we could continue the discussion for a while, but we have set this for 1 hour, and we see this as a starting point for the further discussions. Today we've heard about that the reference architecture is intended for the entire ecosystem of the Cloud-Edge Continuum. We also heard that it's the first version in the sense of a groundwork. The term was used, nothing too exciting, but it's about developing common understanding. Also for the common understanding, I myself and Alberto talked about the ICRA initiative and not about the IPCEI Cloud, because the ICRA initiative already includes the idea of opening up these IPCEI projects to a broader audience. In this perspective, the next version of the reference architecture I'm not responsible for this, but maybe call it not IPCEI-CIS Reference Architecture, but something like Multi-Provider Cloud-Edge Reference Architecture. But the important thing is that the process for further development has now begun. And as said, you can find here the interactive version of this reference architecture document, where you can also already provide feedback with an online questionnaire. And I think all of us are now looking forward to version 2, which was said is planned for the end of the year. Nevertheless, we see already the existing building blocks as a starting point for discussion and also as a framework to sort the different open source components that will be developed. Yeah, perhaps also quick word about ICRA.com and the CISERO website. The ICRA.com website is a classical website that provides a lot of information about the initiative. There you can download the reference architecture and so on. While on the other hand, the CISERO website aims more on encouraging participation and offering interactive formats and support the cooperation and collaboration with external stakeholders. And in that sense, collaboration with external stakeholders, we already have planned several activities in September, October, and November. The next one would be on the 3rd of September. There we want to discuss with you the interoperability aspects across the architectural layers of this endeavor. And with that, we have now reached 4 o'clock. That's the intended end time for this webinar. I wanted to thank all of you for your active participation. And yeah, let's keep in contact. We also have newsletters and other forms to register on our website. Looking forward to see you in one of our further webinars and workshops. And I want to thank Alberto, Florian, and Mauro for their inputs. Have a good day and goodbye.